Well, hello, welcome to another edition of Gridiron Nation Canada. Darren Dupont in the big chair as Jim Mullin is away, but he'll be back next week. Welcome to the program. Glad to have you along. And let's welcome in Gord Randall, who's out there on the West Coast as well and sporting the Wyoming jersey. We got to start with that, man. Tell us about that and why you're wearing it today.
Well, I just on the heels of Josh Allen's big performance this past weekend, I figured I'd pull the reigning NFL MVP's jersey back out. Love the deep cut of Wyoming in the Mountain West. There wasn't a great year for the Cowboys, but that's okay. Still a sweet jersey. So that's figured I'd dust it off since I wanted a break from the suit jacket for a week.
Hey, I love it. And you know what? If we roll with the jerseys, I'm all for it. Keep that going. And speaking of the Mountain West, let's go right there. Championship weekend. And how about Ty Benefield and Boise State? All they do is win, Gord.
Certainly all they do is win the Mountain West. And the bad news is that they won't be able to win the Mountain West next year because they're off to join the Pac-12. But even in a year that I think most fans of the Boise State Broncos would say fell short of expectations, losing 4 games across the season, even in a season that fell a little bit short of expectations, of course they get it together and manage to win that title game. And despite having those 4 losses and just squeaking into this game by the skin of their teeth, they managed to luck out and host it. And they kicked the you-know-what out of the UNLV Rebels to win the game again. I think this was the 3rd year in a row that those two teams specifically met in the Mountain West Championship game, and Boise's going to leave the conference with UNLV having never summited that mountain. So a nice little way to cap off their time in the Mountain West for the Broncos. And with regards to Ty Benefield, just another day at the office for him, right? Leads the Broncos in tackles all over the field as per usual. One of those tackles was for a loss. Like, this guy does everything. He's down on the line of scrimmage. He's back in coverage. He can play deep middle. He can go sideline to sideline. It's really impressive, the different things that they ask him to do on the football field and the way that he executes them from top to bottom. And when you watch them play, you can see he's really the field general on that defense. He takes on a lot of the stuff that usually you associate maybe more so with the middle linebacker as kind of the signal caller. And he is taking on a lot of that stuff for the Broncos, directing his secondary men around. So he's really blossomed this year. It's been impressive to watch.
Yeah, fun watching him and the way he leads that Broncos defense. For sure. And they're headed to bowl season. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. But you mentioned the move to the Pac-12. What does that mean for Boise, and what's that going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting move. It's nice to see the Pac-12 get back up off the ground. The reality is the majority, the backbone of that conference are teams that were in Boise State's conference this past year as well, right? Colorado State, Fresno State, Utah State, San Diego State, all making that move with them. So I think maybe a slight step up in competition, but let's just forget that the Mountain West has also been playing crossover schedules with Oregon State and Washington State, the two Pac-12 holdovers the last 2 years as well. So I don't know that it'll change the landscape that much for Boise State, and frankly, I think they'll probably be a preseason favorite in that new Pac-12 conference again. So it'll kind of just be status quo, just with a different name at the top and on the trophy at the end of the day.
All right, we'll get more on bowl season coming up as well. But as you guys have touched on, Canadians are prominent in the FCS as well. So how about those championships?
Yeah, I mean, I want to touch on Brendan Barrow, who had an excellent game, over 100 all-purpose yards for Rhode Island. Unfortunately, they fell short, so they are out. And that leaves our last remaining hope in the FCS playoffs as the University of South Dakota. And they blew the doors off of Mercer this past weekend, 47-0, which is a very lopsided scoreline that you rarely see at this point in the season. But the Coyotes were rolling on all cylinders this past week, and Carter Dixon, the Torontonian on the defensive line, number 50 for them, was quite prominent. 5 tackles from that defensive end spot. Did a really good job and frankly put up probably his best game of the year and the biggest moment. So he'll be a name to keep an eye on as they move forward. He's one of a couple Canadians on that South Dakota squad, but the most prominent at this point in time.
Okay, appreciate that. Always an exciting time of year as we get to bowl season and the end of the college football calendar, which means Cornish Trophy, right? Coming up soon. And later we're going to roll out the top 5 Canadians who are nominees for the Cornish Trophy. So an exciting week here on the program. But Gord, who's your Canadian Freshman of the Year? Who are the future Cornish Trophy contenders?
I'll spotlight a few guys that I think should be in the conversation that made us pay attention a little bit in their freshman year. Ryder Cush, the tight end at Temple, already getting significant snaps for the Owls, and not putting up a ton of counting stats, but chipping in as a true freshman. That's really impressive stuff for the Delta BC native. Floyd Boucard, the Montrealer out at USC, Southern Cal, has moved his way into the rotation there as well on a bona fide top 25 team. SC misses the playoff this year again, but just on the outside looking in. I think they'll probably finish in the high teens in the national rankings. So a good, very talented squad that, with the arrow pointing up, they just pulled in the top-ranked recruiting class this past week for the 2026 season. So things are looking good in South Central, and Floyd Boucard is a big part of that. But I would say the freshman of the year for the Canadians has got to be Antoine Delorier, starting at linebacker for the Syracuse Orange, and as a whole, it was a brutal season, a real step back for the Orange. But Antoine Delorier was that fantastic for them, over 60 tackles on the season, and just kind of a steady sitting presence in the middle of that defense, which is some impressive stuff for a freshman.
Absolutely, it is. Appreciate that. Great list you have. Now, let's get Alex back into the program. He's back again this week, and I'm curious to see who he's got on his list in Border Ballers.
Welcome back to Border Ballers. I'm in my Whitney shirt today because, well, why not? And second of all, those defensive coordinators will always love you. When you miss as few tackles as Chris Dixon does, South Dakota's in the FCS quarterfinals thanks in part to the Torontonian, who misses just 6.6% of his tackles per PFF. That's top 5 among interior D linemen who've played at least 600 snaps. He's got that big frame, so it's hard to get past him. Name so nice, you say it twice. Freshman from Brooks, Alberta, Bol, not the basketball player, looped 2 gaps to make a second and long, a third and even longer, collecting his first career sack in Boise State's regular season finale over a week ago, before the Broncos took home their 3rd straight conference championship on Friday. That's it for Border Ballers. I'll see you on Saturday.
Thanks, Alex. Now, Gord, who's your NCAA Canadian of the week?
Well, it's the only Canadian in significant action in the FBS this past weekend, and of course, it's Ty Benefield. 8 total tackles for him, as I mentioned earlier. Another tackle for a loss, as he helps his Broncos kind of salvage their season. We talked about this on last week's program, that despite the disappointing record, that for Boise, winning the conference is kind of the bare minimum bar for a successful season for them. So I think they got to be feeling pretty good about themselves that they were able to do that and kind of make up for some of the earlier disappointments and get onto the right foot heading into bowl season.
Coming up later on in the program, we will unveil the 5 nominees for the Cornish Trophy, plus a little Canadian drama around the college football playoff. We'll get to that on the other side of the break.
High school football coaches nominate your players for the NFL Canada Way to Play Awards. Each week, winners earn a $3,000 equipment grant for their school program. Show us game footage that highlights safe, proper technique, and impactful play. Winners announced weekly on NFL Live and on NFL Canada's social channels. Learn more at nfl.com/CA Way to Play.
Hey, welcome back to the program. We got lots to get to, so Gord, hop on in and let's go. Let's go north of the border. You guys were talking a lot about this situation in McGill, the sports that have been cut. But in the past week, that conversation is growing and growing and growing. What are you hearing?
Yeah, it's a really disappointing headline out of McGill, right? And I think that it's indicative of the budget crunches that a lot of Canadian universities are facing right now. And I thought there was a really good piece in the Montreal Gazette this past weekend. The author's name is escaping me at this point in time, so apologies for that. But the thesis of the piece was that this decision to cut sports for McGill was a decision. It was a choice that they made. It wasn't demanded necessarily by necessity. They might have had to make some cuts somewhere, but they decided that these sports were those that they were comfortable with losing. And I think that it's really created some nerves around the country and been the latest reminder that sports across the board, and in particular football, are making on some shaky footing right now, right? Football was not one of the sports cut in that decision, but it was made very clear by McGill that that was a consideration. When I was at UBC back in the day, which is now, 12, 13 years ago, they had the performance review for their athletics too, and they made it clear at that point in time that football was potentially on the chopping block. Obviously, it didn't get cut, but that was a possibility. SFU actually did cut football. So there's these unfortunate smoke signals popping up left and right around the country that show that the system is not in great health right now, athletically, and that increasingly institutions, when they're facing these budget cuts, are having to make tougher and tougher decisions. And oftentimes, as an academic institution, when push comes to shove, will look at athletics as extras. It's extracurricular stuff that they don't necessarily have to offer to continue functioning as a university. And so, as much as we disagree with that notion, they feel like it's cuttable. And so it is a shame, especially like McGill is not a small institution. Let's not forget, right? One of the finest institutions in this country academically, a large scale, world-class international school. And this is the budget crunch they're facing. It does concern me when I think about the possibility of some of the smaller institutions out there, like, a Mount Allison, for example, or something like that, for whom these budget cuts will maybe even have to be more severe.
Yeah, it'll be something worth following and interesting to see where this goes. And for now, football not affected, and we'll see what happens down the road. Look, it was Selection Sunday across the college football playoff, and all eyes were on Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama, maybe Vanderbilt. But good news for the Canadian perspective, Miami gets in. What was your thoughts on the way the bracket unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, let's focus on the positives, which is the Hurricanes getting in. I think they're deserved of such. They almost slipped up on it. And it is a real shame that the ACC did nothing to help them out with their conference structure and excluding them from their championship title game. There's already precedent in other conferences. That's actually how Boise State got into the Mountain West title game, that they will prioritize teams that are highest national ranked in case of a tie. I really feel the ACC should have done that, because I just don't think you got the two best ACC teams in the title game. And with Duke pulling the upset at 5 losses, they almost had the ACC miss out entirely because of all that chaos. And so it's nice for the conference that the committee found a way to get Miami in, and it's good for us as Canadian fans because we get to watch Keem Messidor play some more meaningful football. And I think it's great that it couldn't be better timing for Keem to be on this stage in his last year, really coming on strong and building up his stock on NFL draft boards. And he has a really great opportunity in front of him to continue doing that. They'll start by traveling to College Station and playing Texas A&M in the opening round. I believe that's December 20th, that game. So keep your eyes peeled for that one.
Well, early on, what do you think of their chances to make a run the way they've been playing down the stretch?
Yeah, it's a tough draw with A&M, and A&M, the SEC was also kind of in a tough spot where A&M probably should have been in the SEC title game instead of Alabama, especially the way that game played out. Oof. But A&M had been rolling all season long, and then they fall flat in their last game of the regular season against Texas. So it's hard to know what to make of this A&M team and whether that was just a bit of a stepping on a banana peel or a sign of some worrying trends for them. I think Miami's got as much talent as anybody in the country. And at the end of the day, I think it'll come down to Carson Beck. Carson Beck has been at this level. He's battle tested. He should be able to handle the big spotlight. But when Miami has fallen short this year is because Beck has not taken care of the ball in a way that you would expect a fifth-year senior quarterback who's getting paid a lot of money, by the way, to do. So if he is able to do that, then I like the Hurricanes' chances to even potentially pull an upset. But it'll be not easy for them, that's for sure.
College football playoff, conference championships, and now bowl season is ahead. We're seeing some bowl games already be announced. We saw Boise State's going to get Washington. That's coming up really quickly on the 13th. But we're also, Gord, seeing some teams decide and decline invitations to bowl games.
Yeah, the most prominent of which is Notre Dame, who just missed out on the playoff. And for what it's worth, to soapbox briefly, I think it was an injustice that they did. The only 2 games that they lost were to top 15 teams. They were in the first 2 weeks of the season, right? Both teams they lost to are in the playoff. And so that's I just don't understand what more the committee could really want from them. And yet Alabama still manages to find a way to get in fresh off a 3-touchdown loss in the SEC title game, and 3 losses overall. So I do feel like Notre Dame kind of got shortchanged by not being included in the playoff. And I think that there's been a lot of criticism of the committee's process this year, and I think justifiably so. But Notre Dame responds to that by opting out of the bowl game. They were actually going to go play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which, if you haven't watched one, is probably the best marketed bowl across the country right now. It's a great, and it's too bad that Notre Dame didn't want to be a part of that. But they decided to opt out. There's a couple others that have, mostly due to coaching changes. So Kansas State and Iowa State are another two, for example, that have opted out as well. And this, to be honest with you, Darren, like, this is ESPN kind of reaping what they sowed, because all that we've gotten from them all year long has been wall-to-wall playoff or bust. It's been every single game you watch has been, yeah, here's the highlights from the first half. Anyway, let's talk about the playoff. Right. And we talked about it a few times on the show this season, but I just feel that it does such a disservice that they're so hyper fixated on that. And it kind of invalidates 90% of the ball that's being played across the country during the season. And I just think that that's really, like I said, it's an injustice. And so I do kind of find it ironically funny that ESPN is going to also end up on the short end of things, because they, of course, own most of the bowl properties. So these games that are non-playoff bowl games, the quality of that product is being heard, and ESPN's bottom line is being heard, because they can't help but just hype up the playoff as the main event. And while I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, there's also, you've got to keep focusing on the value of some of the other things out there, and you know, those teams that do go 8-4 and go win a bowl game, like, there's still some prestige to that should be emphasized, and it just feels like that's been lost in the playoff era.
Yeah, you're right. You see Ohio State lose a close one. They go down in the rankings. BYU loses their conference championship. They fall out of the playoff. Alabama loses big, and they don't move at all. So there is some things to decide for sure. And you're right. With the college football playoff meaning everything, there's talk about, well, what do conference championships mean? What do bowl games mean? There's a lot for college football to figure out.
Yeah, I saw some suggestion that some of these conference championship games, like, maybe they don't even need to be playing them anymore, like, because they've just kind of lost their meaning, right? The SEC championship game, like, a lot of people saw it as this kind of fait accompli, that both the teams in that game were going to end up in the playoff anyway. And so it really is a shame that it devalues that, and then, of course, further devalues that in that it seems like the committee maybe just didn't even watch the championship games, because, like you said, Alabama doesn't move at all. Miami, Notre Dame, by the way, who both didn't play last week, Notre Dame had been ahead of Miami in the standings, and then all of a sudden they flipped again. For nobody knows why. It's been kind of all over the map, and so yeah, I think it's really disappointing when you're like, I to be honest with you, I didn't watch a lot of these games super closely, because it was just, you didn't see the larger implication of most of them. If I was focusing my attention, sorry, just to finish my thought, if I was focusing my attention, like, I was focusing on the MAC championship, I was focusing on the Sun Belt championship, right? Like, I was focusing on those mid-major championships, because for those teams, that was kind of their season for a lot of them. And so it just felt like a more compelling product.
I agree with you, and following it the same way. Ohio State, Indiana, great game, but what did it really mean? Both teams are going to be at the top of the table anyways when it comes to the college football playoff. Okay, well, end of the year, which means we're getting closer and closer to handing out the Cornish Trophy. The 5 finalists for top Canadian in the NCAA will be unveiled after the break.
There it is, our CFC 50, the top 10 high school programs in the country for this week. By the way, if you're a high school football player born in 2009 to 2011, head on over to CanadaFootballChat.com to register now for the CFC Evaluation Camp Tour. Stop in one of 9 locations across Canada for your chance to play in the 2026 CFC Prospect Game on TSN.
All right, welcome back. Been waiting for this one for a little while. Let's get to it. Here are the 5 finalists for the Cornish Trophy.
Boise State safety Ty Benefield is a junior Canadian standout, a Vancouver-raised son of former CFL linebacker David Benefield, and he now patrols the back end of the Broncos defense. At 6'2" and about 205 pounds, Ty wears number 0 and brings quarterback smarts from his youth days north of the border. In 2025, he's been the heartbeat of an elite Boise pass defense, earning first-team All-Mountain West honors and defensive MVP of the conference championship game. Benefield has piled up around 90 tackles, including 58 solo stops, with 7.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and both a forced and recovered fumble. His game highs include multiple 11-tackle outings and a 23-yard interception return, underlying that he's as reliable as a closer there is in the Mountain West. Rutgers safety Jed Elad is a veteran Canadian playmaker from Mississauga, Ontario, whose road to the Big Ten has run through Ohio University, Garden City Community College, and a breakout stint at UNLV. The 6-foot, 202-pound senior wearing number 9 lines up all over the secondary, bringing 7 years of college experience to the Knights' back end. In 25, he's Rutgers' leading tackler, racking up 80 total stops, 51 of them solo, with 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and a blocked punt taken back for a touchdown. His game highs include 11 tackles in the season finale against Penn State and at least 5 tackles in 11 different games, numbers that keep him among the most productive safeties in the Big Ten and make him a Cornish Trophy nominee for the 3rd straight year as one of the top Canadians in NCAA football. Miami defensive lineman Akeem Messidor is the Canadian engine in the Hurricanes' front 7. An Ottawa, Ontario native with Haitian roots has become a star at the U. Growing up in the North Gloucester Giants program, he moved on to Clearwater Academy in Florida, then off to West Virginia before he transferred to Miami. At 6'3", 280, wearing number 3, Messidor can line up anywhere from the edge to the interior and wreck blocking schemes. In 2025, the 6-year senior has recorded 46 tackles, 26 of them solo, 7 sacks, and 4 fumbles, earning first All-ACC honors. Edmonton native Noor Gatquath put together an important 2025 season on the defensive line for Wake Forest. After earning more reps this year, he delivered steady production with disruptive moments that stood out. Gatquath finished the season with 7 solo tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and a key sack in ACC play. His signature moment came with a rare interception for a defensive lineman, reading a rollout, dropping into the lane, and taking the ball away in a tight road win. What didn't always show up in the box score was his presence in the pass rush rotation. He consistently forced pressure, helping collapse pockets, and was part of a defensive front that held opponents under 200 yards rushing 6 times. Rutgers running back Antoine Raymond is one of college football's breakout stars in 2025. The Montreal, Quebec native first shone in high school in Quebec before transferring to Clearwater Academy in Florida, then reclassifying to Rutgers in 2024. Now a sophomore, the 5'11", 205-pound number 3 is Rutgers' feature back. In 2025, he logged 224 carries for 1,241 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns, plus 18 receptions for 225 yards and 2 more scores. Those numbers rank in the top tier nationally for rushing production and touchdowns, earning him Doak Walker Award semifinalist status and second-team All-Big Ten honors. His signature game high, 240 yards rushing on 41 carries against Maryland, the most in the Big Ten, and the 3rd best single-game total in FBS this season.
Your thoughts, Gord, on the 5 contenders up for the Cornish Trophy?
I think there was a clear-cut top 3. Jim and I talked about that on last week's program. I think 4-5 was much more difficult to determine who made that cut. I think there was a logjam of guys that could have been contenders for that. If there's one guy that got left out that I would have loved to find space for in this top 5, it was probably Wesley Bailey, who had a great season at Louisville, I thought. 5 sacks this year, another 6 tackles for a loss. Really stepped his game up for the Cardinals, and unfortunately they fell a little bit short of where they wanted to be in the end, but he was a guy that I thought would love to have found a way to squeak in, though I don't think there was anybody obvious to bump.
All right. Coming up, the game of the week. Don't go anywhere. All right, back on Gridiron Nation Canada. Gord, let's get to it. What's your game of the week?
Well, South Dakota looks to continue being road warriors in the FCS quarterfinals. They travel to Missoula to face Montana in what should be a rockin' house. So keep an eye out for that one. But my game of the week is the start of bowl season. It's the Los Angeles Bowl this Saturday on the 13th between Boise State and Washington. And we've got Canadians on both sides in this one. We've talked to death about Ty Benefields, but we also should probably talk about Bryce Butler over at Washington. He's had a really good season and emerging as a key piece of that Huskies rotation in the interior of the defensive line, the Torontonian. And so this should be a really good one because Washington kind of flirted with top 25 contention all year. I think for such an early bowl season matchup, I think that this is a really high quality one. And so it'll be good to watch that one go down at SoFi on Saturday night.
Awesome stuff, Gord. Appreciate you. Thanks for everything this week. And next week, Jim is back on Football Island. So until then, I'm Darren Dupont. Thanks for watching.